everybody. It is a Saturday in April, and yes, we're still quarantined, but I decided to make some quick bread today because I don't like to wait around. So I'm making banana bread recipe, but I'm actually going to put it in these mini muffin tins because I think it'll be nice to just have a little treat that you can pop in that doesn't have a ton of calories in it, but it's a nice little sweet treat. So I've done a little prepping before we get started. I have 2 bananas mashed up in the bowl. I waited until they were pretty ripe so they would be easy to mash. And to that, we're gonna add 2 eggs that I've already whisked together. You wanna make sure that you whisk those before you put them into the banana mixture. And we wanna make sure that we combine that really well so we get all the eggs and bananas mixed together. Doesn't take very long at all. That's what I love about this recipe. It's super quick. And instead of using sugar, because this is actually a little bit of a vegetarian vegan recipe, although I have a little switch later that takes that away a little bit. So I have a 1/2 cup of pure maple syrup, and we're just gonna pour that in there. That takes the place of the sugar, but it'll still be super sweet, and you won't have that refined sugar that we're all trying to avoid right now. And then it calls for a teaspoon of vanilla, which I don't know if you guys know this trick, but the lid of the vanilla is exactly 1 teaspoon. So I always cheat. One less thing to get dirty is if I use the lid of the vanilla to put in that teaspoon. And then this calls for 3 tablespoons of melted coconut oil. So again, you're gonna have that pure, natural ingredient instead of using something that's been processed or refined. So we get that all mixed together. So now here's where the trick comes in. I wanted to put a 1/2 cup of, or a 1/4 cup of Greek yogurt, but I didn't have any yogurt. The yogurt I had left over, I made dill dip out of, so wasn't really thinking. And I don't want to go to the store and do the whole mask up and go out just for a 1/4 cup of yogurt. So I'm actually using mayonnaise. Mayonnaise is a good substitute for yogurt. And I don't know, for those of you who are from the Chicago area, which is where I'm at, Portillo's cake, which is super popular around here, uses mayonnaise in their cake. So it's great for adding moisture to any pastry, cake, well, not pastry, not like a pie crust or something like that, but any kind of cake that you are making, it makes it super moist. Similar to like when I was growing up, we loved Texas sheet cake. And if you're not familiar with that, it's an amazing cake. It's super thin, and you put this warm powdered sugar fudgy icing on top. Super favorite at home when I was growing up. That actually has sour cream in it. So it's a similar concept. So then you're gonna add baking powder. Because we're making this low sodium, I always use the gluten-free, sodium-free baking powder instead of using baking soda. Now, as you can imagine, it's not gonna rise quite as much as it does with the baking soda, but it still has the same properties that will leaven the bread somewhat, and you can cut out all that sodium, which is super important for us trying to eat heart healthy. So also in here is a 1/2 teaspoon of cinnamon. I like to use Saigon cinnamon. It's just a personal preference. I think it has a bolder flavor. So there's a teaspoon of baking powder and a 1/2 teaspoon of cinnamon that we're gonna pour in there. And we're gonna mix that up. It takes a little more mixing to get that cinnamon mixed in, because we all know that likes to just kind of separate and float around. All right, so now the other thing that makes this a much healthier recipe is I took rolled oats and I ground them up in the food processor. So I have 1.5 cups of oat flour. I didn't go to the store, buy the fancy stuff, literally took rolled oats, threw them in the processor, and I have 1.5 cups of oat flour, which is gonna give the bread a little more texture, but it's also keeping us away from that refined flour. So again, just making a couple different substitutes. You can take one of your favorites and turn it into an even healthier alternative. So I'm gonna use the spatula just to kind of fold these in, get them nice and mixed up. 2. And then I love nuts in my banana bread, or anything actually. I love nuts. So I am putting in a 1/2 cup of chopped nuts. And normally I kind of just rough chop them, but I actually put these in the food processor as well because I'm gonna make these little mini muffins, and I didn't want the nuts to be so big, the chunks to be so big that they took up a lot of space, because it's not gonna be a lot of batter in that little cup. So they're pretty fine, but it's still gonna give you that flavor and a little more texture. So with the nuts and the oat flour, these are gonna be a pretty hearty muffin. So honestly, that is all there is to the mix. And if you can see, I don't know if you can, I have a little bit of glare, because the sun is actually shining in Chicago today. Can you believe it? I swear the sun took a quarantine when we all had to go home and stay home. The sun decided to do the same in Illinois. So I don't have a fancy scooper. Note, I'm gonna put that on my list to buy, especially for these little muffins. So I'm just gonna take these 2 tablespoons, and I think it's probably gonna be about a tablespoon of mix in each cup will be the perfect amount. Not sure if you can see that, but I am gonna go ahead and fill up these muffin tins, or these muffin cups, sorry. And the oven is heating at 350. So I'm gonna put those in there. Probably only gonna take 6 or 7 minutes. I'm gonna have to keep an eye on them because normally I make this in a bread pan, so I don't know exactly how long they're gonna take. But I will follow up with you once I get these out of the oven, and we'll see what the finished product looks like. Okay, so the finished product is all done. And I was surprised, it actually took about 12 minutes for these to cook, so they were completely cooked through. So it was a little bit longer than I expected, which I guess I should have thought about that a little bit more, because it takes 40 to 60 minutes to bake the whole loaf of bread. So it probably makes sense that it would take a little longer than 7 to 8 minutes. So I don't know if you can see, but they still raised up nicely, even with that baking powder instead of the baking soda. And you can see inside the finished product, a sweet, yummy treat that I hope you guys will all enjoy. The one thing I didn't mention when we were making the muffins was I didn't add any salt. The recipe could have a little bit of salt in it if you wanted it to, but it's not required, and you can't really tell that it's missing from the finished product. So I hope you guys enjoy these little banana muffins, and I'll see you again soon. Make sure to make every meal a healthy meal. Thanks, this is Christy from Christy Cooks for Life.